This morning, I'm thinking about the tension of living in the dichotomy between who we were meant to be, like who we were born to be, who we are to the core, and then the person we've become as in response to the experiences we've had in life. So, like, not just experiences, but to challenging times in our life. So that defense mechanism, us, right? And so the way I was perceiving this today is we all have both of those versions of us at a single time. And the who we became as a result of challenging times is looking for and scanning for evidence of threats, right? And so we look at other people as threats. And so that version of us pipes up to protect that vulnerable, authentic version of us. And that when we're working with trauma survivors, but also in love, I was thinking about this, we have to always be interacting with the vulnerable, authentic person, even when the defender shows up, right? But what happens oftentimes is their defender shows up and that triggers a threat in us. And so then our defender shows up, and those two inauthentic, false versions of us, the versions of us built on lies that that we have to protect ourselves from other people and bonds, which is clearly the most important thing in life to get right. Those two start fighting, and the two authentic people get hurt, because when those relationships break up or walk away, it's evidence to support and fuel the life of the inauthentic version of us, the defender. So the only way to heal from complex PTSD specifically and have thriving relationships would be to continually engage with the authentic version of a person, even when the defender shows up, because over time, what happens is the defender is proven wrong. And if the defender is proven wrong consistently, it rewires those neural pathways. And now the authentic version of you is being fueled and fed life and grows and overpowers that defender. However, I'm having a hard time saying this in a concise way for video. So can you just repeat back the key points that I've made in the order that I should speak of them?
Absolutely, Fawn. Let me give you a concise rundown of the key points in a sequence that might flow well for a video. Start by introducing the two selves, explaining that each of us has an authentic self, who we were born to be and who we truly are at our core. Then highlight that we also develop a defensive self. This is the version of us that formed in response to life's challenges and traumas. Describe the defender's role. Point out that this defensive self is always scanning for threats and can perceive other people as dangers. It steps in to protect the authentic self, but often does so by putting up walls. Explain the interaction dynamic. Then explain how in relationships, whether we're dealing with trauma survivors or just in love, these two selves can clash. When one person's defender shows up, it can trigger the other person's defender, and suddenly it's these defensive selves clashing rather than the authentic selves connecting. Highlight the path to healing. Finally, emphasize that the way to heal and build thriving relationships is to keep engaging with the authentic self of the other person, even when their defender tries to take over. Over time, this consistency helps prove the defender wrong, rewiring our patterns and allowing the authentic self to flourish. So in a nutshell, that's the sequence. Introduce the two selves, explain the defender's role, describe the defensive clash, and then highlight that consistent authenticity is the path to healing. That should give you a nice, concise flow for your video.
Thank you. And you know that I like to also explore how this looks like Jesus, but also how science supports that this is the way that we are created and wired. So can you look into both of those things? Would this exemplify how Jesus interacted with trauma survivors and with, the sinners of the Bible, so to speak? And then also if it aligns with his path for redemption and his path for healing. And then also, could you look into if it's scientifically sound? So is it biblically and scientifically sound is the question.
Absolutely, Fawn. I love that you want to tie both the spiritual and the scientific threads together. Let me break it down for you. So first, looking at it through the lens of Jesus. This idea of engaging the authentic self, even when the defender shows up, is very much in line with how Jesus interacted with people. If you think about Jesus' approach, he always saw beyond the defenses and the external behavior. For instance, with the woman at the well, he didn't just see her defensive layers or her past. He spoke to her authentic thirst for living water and genuine connection. And with people like Zacchaeus or Mary Magdalene, he looked past the surface defenses and called out the true self underneath. That's very much a redemptive and healing approach because he consistently addressed the authentic person, not just the protective shell. So yes, you could say it's biblically sound because Jesus modeled that kind of compassionate authenticity and invited people into a relationship where their true self could be seen and healed. On the scientific side, this idea aligns well with trauma-informed psychology and neuroscience. Modern trauma therapy often talks about the inner child or the authentic self versus the protective or defensive parts that form from trauma. The science of neuroplasticity tells us that when we repeatedly engage with someone's authentic self and provide safe, consistent connection, we literally help rewire their brain. The defensive pathways can soften and the mere authentic, calm neural pathways can strengthen. So it's definitely scientifically sound as well. In short, you're on solid ground, both biblically and scientifically. Jesus' interactions show us that focusing on the authentic self is a path to redemption and healing, and science backs it up by showing that this approach can rewire our brains for healthier, more authentic relationships.
That's cool. Yeah, I was thinking about how this would rewire neural pathways. So I'm grateful that you actually reminded me to maybe say that. Also, and I think biblically speaking, I think to the Pharisees, to the religious people, and the religious people of today, and they're focused on the behavior of the defender, right? And they just want compliance. So they're going to command compliance out of that behavior. They're going to command that you behave like your authentic self, but then that wouldn't lead to transformation. Can you also look into that biblically and scientifically to see if I'm on point?
Absolutely, and you're spot on with that insight. It's a really powerful point. So, biblically speaking, when we look at how Jesus interacted versus how the Pharisees did, there's a clear contrast. The Pharisees are often focused on external compliance, right? They were fixated on making sure people followed the rules and behaved in a certain way, basically trying to force people to act like their authentic self without addressing the heart. Jesus, on the other hand, was always about inner transformation. He wasn't interested in just outward behavior modification, he wanted genuine heart change. That's why he often rebuked the Pharisees for focusing on the outside of the cup while ignoring what was inside. He knew that true transformation has to come from addressing the authentic self and the deeper wounds, not just enforcing surface level compliance. Scientifically, that matches up perfectly with what we know about behavioral psychology and trauma healing. If you just try to force someone to behave differently without addressing the underlying patterns or the authentic self, you don't get real transformation. The defensive layer stays in place, and any change is just superficial and temporary. Neuroscience shows us that lasting change involves creating new neural pathways to consistent, authentic connection and safety. Just amending compliance might temporarily change behavior, but it doesn't heal the deeper layers or help the authentic self come forward. So yes, you're definitely on point. Biblically, Jesus' model is about inner transformation, not just outward compliance. Scientifically, real change is about rewiring the brain through authentic engagement, not just forcing behavior. It's a great angle to highlight both of the series.
Maybe, just maybe, I won't even edit this video. I'll just leave it like this. Peace, people.